WoSHH Rivers Trust.
Cormac Painters and Decorators, your local tradesman, with all internal and external works undertaken at competitive prices. Visit cormacpainters.co.uk, sponsors of today's breakfast show on Radio Sky.
Well, we're delighted to be speaking to Isabel from the Skye and WoSHH Rivers Trust. Welcome to Radio Sky.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Isabel, we're going to ask you a little bit about yourself first, but Skye and WoSHH Rivers Trust, it's something that I haven't come across before, so I'm really excited to find out more about it. Tell us what you do.
Yeah, I think the organisation has probably had quite a low profile for several years, but it did actually start back in 2008. We were previously the Skye Fisheries Trust, but now we've had a few rebrandings over the years and are now the Skye and WoSHH Rivers Trust. We are focused primarily on protecting and monitoring wild fish species that are native to our area, and that normally covers mostly Atlantic salmon and brown trout are probably the most common fish species that people will be familiar with, but also includes things like the European eel, which is a protected species, which people often will get a little grossed out by because they're a little different looking, but doesn't mean that they're any less exciting and interesting. And then a few other sort of interesting fish that we'll see from time to time, like sticklebacks. But yes, our main focus is trout and salmon. So we do a lot of work monitoring juvenile populations in our freshwater systems, and then a little bit of work in coastal areas monitoring adult sea trout, and then a little bit of work monitoring adult return rates and things like that in some of our major rivers, like the Snizort up at the north end of Skye, and also a few others like the Kilmartin and Sligahan.
Great. Isabel, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved in it?
So I, if the accent didn't give it straight away, I'm not actually from Skye myself, but I have been coming here since I was a kid. I've got family on the island, and I've always felt a really strong connection to being here and just love Skye so much, and was fortunate enough to move in with some family members, I think 9 years ago now, on the island, and started volunteering with the Skye Fisheries Trust, and went through a few different sort of iterations of volunteering and part-time work, and then actually got the opportunity to do a PhD with the University of Glasgow through the Fisheries Trust, and various sponsors, and that was focused on sea trout on Skye primarily, and looking at how they use the marine environment and sort of important areas that they feed in and utilize the most, and how different anthropogenic influences can impact them. And then came back after I finished that and started working at the Trust full time. So I'm now the senior biologist for the organization, which is still quite small, but we're working on growing. So that's sort of my background with, I guess sort of fisheries and the organization itself.
Wow, fantastic. Amazing that you can come here and volunteer and then go on to study and be where you are now, which is really a fascinating job with, rivers, and fish, a huge part of our culture here. And we're going to talk about a really exciting project that caught my attention personally, because being from Ullapool, I was really fascinated by you're going to do a project with herring. So talk to us about that.
Yes, absolutely. A bit apprehensive because you probably know a little bit more about herring than I do. But,
I'm not sure, but it's kind of more of a cultural thing rather than having any kind of, science behind it. So.
But I think the cultural aspect is a huge part of this project. For those of your listeners that maybe aren't quite so familiar, herring, obviously, as you say, was a huge part of the culture and financial history of Scotland, particularly on the west coast. But unfortunately, their populations have been in decline since about the 1970s, and that's been very apparent in the decline of the herring fishing industry, which has been really devastating for that community itself. But then in the spring of 2018, large shoals of spawning herring were observed in Gairloch on the shores, in the coast of Gairloch for the first time in like 50 years or something like that. And that just sort of spurred on this incredible excitement and interest in like, oh my gosh, they're still there. Yeah. What can we do to protect them? And it sort of became very clear that unlike most marine fish, herring actually need a very precise seabed sediment, or seabed sediment to lay their eggs on, and that's these sort of coarse marl beds, or sort of coarser sediment types, as opposed to just sort of silt or mud or anything like that. And so it's really important for these fish to have these protected nursery habitats, essentially, where they can spawn, their babies can hang out and grow, and so part of this project that is being led by Edinburgh Napier University and funded by the William Grant Foundation is to pull together a very diverse range of stakeholders to identify and produce evidence for the conservation and the restoration of these really specific spawning habitats that are all across the west coast of Scotland. And the sort of the fancy name that they've come up with is the West of Scotland Herring Hunt, or WoSHH, WoSHH. And we're really looking for anyone that's got an interest in herring, is interested in any sort of citizen science project, was previously involved with the herring fishing industry, or had parents that were involved with it, grandparents, anyone like that, any stories or experiences that they're interested in sharing, to get in touch with us or through the WoSHH website and contribute that information. I think another huge part of this is a reporting app where we're trying to get people interested in reporting any spawning activity in herring populations that they're seeing. So if you live near a coastal area that has a marl bed, please by all means get in touch with us. We'd love to sort of point out some interesting things to look out for that can help us to identify, when the herring are spawning, which is sort of around March time, and then you can report that on the app, or tell us and we can report it on the app. The app is currently still in the process of the final stages of being built, and it will be available soon. But there's lots and lots and lots of information on the website that we can point you to. And so, that's sort of the basic outline.
Fascinating. It's such an exciting project. I think, because, as I say, herring is a huge part of our culture, a huge part of our history. It's really exciting to think that could potentially be a part of our future. It was the thing that caught my eye about Skyline Calsh Rivers Trust, and I apologise for that, because I should have known more about what you're up to before the herring project. But I think it's exciting to think that is potentially, if the research goes well, and there is a lot of people reporting in, and you can find ways of securing a future for herring, it's just amazing to think that it can no longer, it's not necessarily part of our cultural past, it's part of our cultural future.
Absolutely. And I think you've said it so eloquently and beautifully there, and I think this idea of trying to bring back what was such an important part of the culture and the history of this island and across the west coast of Scotland would just be an incredible thing. I think not only with herring, but as with so many marine species, it's becoming very clear that we're going through some changes with climate change and things like that, and to see a lot of interest reemerging in protecting what we've got and trying to get us back to where we were, in a way that can support communities the way it used to, or even just to have those iconic species back in our area again is really incredible. And I think a lot of our work focuses on that, and that includes things like herring, which is maybe a bit more marine than what my sort of organization does normally, all the way to Atlantic salmon, which is again another iconic Scottish species that is in serious decline at the moment. So we're really looking forward to sort of championing this forward and hopefully getting as many people interested as we can. I am hopeful that because herring were such a big part of local communities here, that people will feel connected to this project from a historical standpoint and cultural standpoint, and that will hopefully encourage everyone to keep an eye out for herring the next time you're out on a boat or walking next to the shore or going to a nice beach, nice coral beach somewhere.
Yeah. We certainly will. I really do hope the community do, but take this on, because it's so important to think that we do worry about fish populations, wild fish populations, and this is one way that we can all help a little bit to secure the future of them. And exciting that you're working with Napier as well.
Yes,
it's great that this is really. They're, you have a funder for it, and that they will be sort of pushing it forward. And how can people find out more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I should say that we are only one organization that's with this project. So even if you're just sort of traveling through the area and hear this on the radio, but you live up north or further south, we are trying to incorporate as many people across the west coast of Scotland as we can. So please don't feel that you have to be on Skye in order to participate. But you can get in touch with us in any way, you can get in touch with us no matter where you're staying. But if you Google the West of Scotland Herring Hunt, or WoSHH, or if you go to scottishherring.org, then there are a few different resources there. The website is almost completely finished and looking really fantastic. There's a lot of really interesting things and information on there about the cultural significance of herring, about the life cycle of the herring, some really fun facts about the fish themselves, and also the reporting app will be on there as well. So yeah, it will be coming soon, as I said, and hopefully be up and running. But if you have any questions or want to reach out to the Skye and Loch Rivers Trust as well for any more information, you can find us at slrt.org.uk.
Fantastic. Isabel, thank you so much for coming on to Radio Skye to tell us more about it. We really do hope the listeners take it on board and just go and check out what you're up to. Check out the Herring Hunts project. It's really fascinating and so exciting. And just delighted to find out more about it, because herring's a massive part of where I was from, and the history of why even the village of Ullapool, where I'm from, even existed. Yeah. I'm sure it's the case all over the West Coast, and great to see this connection happening across Scotland as well, and having the backing by Napier too. So yeah, come back and tell us how it's going. Do keep us updated on it as well, because it's just been great to speak to you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Susie, and for letting me talk about it. I really appreciate it. And we absolutely will keep everyone posted on how we're doing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cormac Painters and Decorators. Quality local workmanship at a